All right. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for attending and being part of this Q&A session. My name is Remy Awosonya. I am a VTA Contracts Compliance Manager responsible for the Office of Business Development Program and Labor Compliance. As some of you are aware, the USDOT issued a major interim final rule on October 3rd, 2025, which significantly alter how the DBE program is implemented nationwide. This change is not just minor. They affect our certification standards, goal settings, compliance requirements, and how we, as an awarding body that receives our federal funds, manage both current and future federally funded contracts. Because these changes are immediate and mandatory, one of the things we are doing is we've done a Q&A sessions with our project managers, engineers who put together contract formation and to update them on what the new regulatory changes are and how it affects our DBE. And the intent of today's Q&A session will be what has changed in the federal regulations regarding the DBE, how these changes impact you as a prime contractor, subcontractor who has an active and who is also seeking contracting opportunities with VTA, how it affects you, how the DBE-related provisions are paused, and which ones are in effect and why, what actions you as a contractor must take in order to ensure your compliance, as well as assisting the awarding body to be in compliance. And now our Office of Business Development Programs will support you during your contract execution and implementation. One of the things you're going to hear from today is you're going to hear about how our DBE goals are temporarily paused. The DBE program itself is not going away. In fact, some of the states completes the required. What that means is there's going to be a reevaluation of all the DBEs. So VT as an awarding body, as also a certifying agency in the CUCP, we have been in discussion. We have been in meetings with other CUCP partner agencies to see what we need to do, and now we can reevaluate and make sure that the requirements pertaining to the personal narratives, net worth, we follow the compliance aspect of it. So today's presenter is somebody that you probably might know. She's Miss Olivia Fonseca. She did a DBE audit on our DBE programs in 2024. She was previously with Caltrans, and she's been around the country in terms of the DBE rules, regulations, and requirements. Today, she's going to talk about the legal and regulatory requirements pertaining to the context of the DBE IFR. She's going to talk about the shift from race conscious to DBE neutral implementation and the impact of the new changes on the certification, reporting, and any other monitoring effects that affects the DBE, and also how to manage current contracts. If you have a contract with VTA, or if you're proposing to get a contract with VTA, how to manage the contract with regards to the compliance with the new DBE requirements. And out of these sessions, you will get a clarification on what you can do and what you cannot do right now, guidance on how to handle solicitation, contract, all the changes to the contracts, understanding how to manage your subs if you're a prime, and if you're a subs, your interaction with your prime, and practical examples of scenarios that you may consider, including a clear path forward so that we all can be in full compliance. Our goal is to make sure that you guys are successful, and any issues we are able to address it, and if not, we can ask put the questions out to the USDOT for guidance and clarification. So with that said, I'm gonna let Miss Olivia welcome, Miss Olivia, and you can take it away from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Remy, and let me apologize to the audience. My camera is not operating with the Zoom. This is third time that I've given a presentation with VTA, and each time the camera doesn't work. So again, my apologies on that. And for that reason that my camera is not working, and just to ensure that the presentation does not falter, I'm going to ask Jennifer if you could open the presentation for me. Okay. Thank you, Jennifer. So if we could
Olivia, is that your first page?
No, it is not. If you could
Here we go.
Scroll. There you go. Thank you.
All right.
Okay, as Remy has mentioned, today's presentation is about the USDOT Interim Final Rule, and it has its own Federal Register number 90, Volume 190, which makes it official. What the interim final rule does is really changes the DBE program to be a DBE race and gender neutral program. So next slide. On October 3rd, USDOT informed all recipients, and what that means is recipients who receive USDOT dollars, be it federal transit dollars, federal highway, or federal aviation administration dollars. This change that occurred on October 3rd affects all these programs. And it's a result of a legal finding that the U.S. Department of Justice and the DOT confirmed that in the findings of Mid-America Milling Company out of Kentucky, the firm challenged the USDOT's DBE program, indicating it violated the Constitution in applying a presumption that firms who are race and or sex-based were presumed to be socially disadvantaged. So with the USDOT confirmation saying it does violate the constitutional amendments, we are now, as recipients of these dollars, required to make determination of a firm's eligibility to be considered a DBE by the owner's individual determination and assessment that they are socially disadvantaged and economically disadvantaged. So in what this particular Federal Register did is opened up the doors for all firms, regardless of race and or gender, and who are also economically disadvantaged, to be considered a disadvantaged business enterprise firm. Again, removing race and gender as the presumption for being a DBE, to now opening the door for all firms to meet the criteria to be considered a disadvantaged business enterprise. What's important about the interim rule is that it did not suspend or terminate the DBE program. We still have a very active DBE regulations that recipients, VTA being such a recipient, must implement. So now we're going to talk about what the changes have done for the DBE community, and of course the contractors who must implement and administer the DBE rules. So next slide. So one of the new rules that occurred is section number 26.111. It requires the California Unified Certification Program, and every state has a Unified Certification Program, to evaluate all currently certified DBEs and AC DBEs. So AC stands for Airport Concessionaires DBEs. So they too are under the requirement to be reevaluated based on the individual owner's personal and social disadvantage. And in doing so, they would be preparing a personal narrative that addresses their social disadvantage situation and to provide a personal net worth statement to support their economically disadvantaged. So the DBEs on the directory that you are accustomed to looking at in the past, to find DBEs, all those firms must recertify to meet the new standards. And if they do not recertify to meet the new standards, then they will be decertified and be moved from the directory. So this is a very important task that VTA and other agencies in California must complete before the DBE program can be re-implemented with goals, contract goals. So until the reevaluation is complete, recipients cannot set contract goals on contracts. They are not allowed to count DBE participation toward the contract goal, and some compliance provisions have been suspended. In particular is the commercially useful function has been suspended, as well as requiring U.S. contractors to maintain a running tally of the DBE participation payments made. Okay, and again, DBE, but we'll talk about that more on prompt payment in a second. So next slide. So when does this take effect? Actually, October 3rd. And it took effect with the issuance of the interim final rule. It makes the rules enforceable immediately, and it requires the California UCPs and recipients of the USDOT dollars to start the transition into implementing and applying the new rule impact. So USDOT has mentioned in their issuance of the interim final rule that they were going to accept comments for the next 30 days, which ends November 3rd. So there are some potential amendments to the final rule of October 3rd, very likely minor, but there's still the opportunity for public comment, and that's why there's a 30-day public comment period. Next. So what has changed? Part of it is reporting requirements. But first, I want to make sure you understand that a bidders list is still required. When you're submitting your bid and or proposal to VTA, you're still required to provide your bidders list. What is changed in the bidders list, information that you're collecting from firms you are using in addition to firms who indicated an interest in your submission, is that you will not require that those firms identify their race and or sex. That's the change. What the reporting requirements in the rule has also done is pause the data collection on DBE utilization on contracts awarded prior to October 3rd. So if you have a contract that was awarded to you, let's say it was awarded on October 1st, you fall into this requirement to pause the data collection on the DBE utilization. So those are the reports that VTA has in these special provisions that indicate you must submit monthly reports on your DBE utilization, but that's on pause. Data, so the other part is data used to track completion of the uniform report. That's a VTA role, but still requires it did require your input for the completion of this report that then ultimately went to FTA. It also pauses the data used to track individual contract DBE contract attainments. Once again, if you have a contract that was awarded prior to October 3rd, there's a pause in the collection and submission of the DBE utilization reports to FTA. Next slide. So what's interesting and timely for you in this presentation is that USDOT issued a frequently asked questions on October 24th, which was Friday. So what's great about the FAQs is that it provides guidance for recipients on how they're going to administer the rule on existing and new contracts. So after October 3rd, it's requiring us meaning FDA, to amend contract advertisements to remove DBE contract goals. It allows I'll speak to as being VTA. It allows VTA to not have to re-advertise those solicitations for the purpose of just removing the DBE reference in those advertisements, in those solicitations. It requires FDA to revise the DBE special provisions for new contracts. It requires that bids opened or proposed, received, but not yet awarded. So let me give you another example. Let's say that there was a bid opening on October 5th. And it was not awarded yet, so we would have to zero out the DBE goal in that particular bid submission or contract proposal solicitation. Now, let me give you another example. Let's say that you submitted a bid on September 15, and on October 4th, the contract had yet to be awarded. It requires VTA to zero out the DBE goal requirement on that September 15th submission because the contract had not been awarded. So contracts or proposals executed prior to October 3rd are not required to be modified. However, DBE participation is not counted on that particular contract until the re-evaluation of that particular DBE has been completed. If after re-evaluation, every DBE working on the contract is recertified under the new standards, again, the new standards being that the owner has to submit a personal narrative and a new personal net worth statement, then then the contract will not need to be modified. All your DBEs on the contract that you're working on, if they're all recertified, then VTA does not need to modify the contract. If the DBEs are not recertified, then VTA will need to take appropriate action to discontinue the effect of the DBE participation in that particular contract. Again, contracts awarded prior to October 3rd. If VTA does not take appropriate action, where in the situation where not all the DBEs are recertified, if VTA does not take appropriate action, FTA, FHWA, FAA, whoever provided the funding for that contract, will not reimburse VTA with the federal share. Now, we know VTA does not want that to occur, and of course, you don't want that to occur as a contractor on this particular contract in question. So your assistance is really encouraged in asking your DBEs on these contracts to respond to the request to be recertified. Help VTA to get those DBEs on your contract recertified. All we're asking for you to do is encourage those firms, those DBEs, to recertify, to reapply for recertification. Okay, next slide. The other actions in this frequently asked questions is it's making sure that recipients pause the data collection on DBE utilization. As I shared earlier, we're not going to be asking you to submit your running tally on DBE participation and utilization. Prior to October 3rd, DBEs under subcontract may not be terminated or have its work reduced without VTA's consent. The guidance was really clear about making sure you still followed, contractors, you still must follow the termination and or substitution provisions on the DBEs you listed on your contract. Okay? So those provisions still apply, which means you have to give the DBE a 5-day notice as to why you want to terminate them. The DBE would either have to agree or disagree. If you can't come to an agreement with the DBE, you would still need to provide evidence to VTA of your attempt to negotiate with the DBE before you terminate or substitute them, and also provide your good faith effort steps to replace that particular DBE. The other requirement that's still in effect is assurance of non-discrimination. That is a component in your contract provisions that you shall not discriminate on any business, on any subcontractor, on anyone involved in that particular contract with you. So assurance of non-discrimination still applies. What changes though is the commercially useful function reviews on existing contracts and new contracts. A component of the provisions, contract provisions, is asking you as a prime contractor to provide assurance to VTA that the DBEs you have listed and are using on a contract are in fact performing a commercially useful function. Equally, VTA also does their own commercially useful function review of the DBEs on those contracts, but that is on pause. Okay. Next slide. Continuing with the frequently asked questions, open-ended performance plans for design build projects. There's half a page in the FAQ on this particular topic, and I've identified here what I feel is the more salient points in that discussion. Once again, we're looking at when was that award made? Contracts executed prior to October 3rd. The DBE goal and participation should proceed as identified in the performance plan. No change there. DBEs under subcontract may not be terminated or have its work reduced without VTA's written consent. Where a DBE goal is on a design build contract or a separate phase of a design build contract, but no DBEs have signed their subcontracts, the VTA will then take the action to zero out that particular DBE goal on that design build project. The key here is no DBE have signed a subcontract on that design build project. If that's the case, none, then the DBE goal is zeroed out. So you have DBEs on your design build project, you have subcontracts executed with them, but the DBE is not recertified. So VTA will need to take the appropriate action to discontinue the effect of that DBE's participation. So what does that do for the DBE? Well, you would still need to use the DBE like a regular subcontract agreement that you have with them. But for the DBE, what it unfortunately does not protect them in the event there's a requirement or request to terminate or substitute that DBE because the DBE was not recertified. So they don't fall under that protection of requiring you as a contractor to go through VTA to terminate and or substitute the DBE. So if VTA, just like any other situation, if VTA does not take appropriate action, given the circumstances of under a design build of having DBEs under contract or not under contract, then FTA could find VTA non-compliant and not make any payments for that particular contract. So I come back and re-emphasize your help is needed to encourage the DBEs on your contracts to follow the requests to be reevaluated and recertified. Next slide. So now overall on the DBE rules is the requirement to still require the assurance that all subcontractors, suppliers, subconsultants, truckers, you name it, anybody that is not you as a prime are paid promptly. And that will be monitored through the B2G Now system. That does not change. And again, the rule did not change the requirement to monitor the compliance for prompt payment. Under the small business side of the DBE program is encouraging DBE neutral small business set-asides. This is a role that VTA is going to take a good handle on, but it's also encouraging you as contractors to make efforts to solicit and include small businesses on your work that you have existing, and more importantly, documenting your efforts of including small business in future work, okay? So VTA still needs to implement their small business participation plan, which includes advertising contracts on their website, their solicitation system. It still requires the encouragement to attend outreach events and, of course, encourages, voluntary small business inclusion on your contracts. Next slide. So what's our message today? Hopefully we've answered the points that Remy brought up in his presentation. But clearly the message is the DBE program still exists. It's going to be a new name. It's going to be DBE Neutral Program. Contractors must follow the assurances of non-discrimination. You still need to collect and submit a bidders list with the bid or after negotiations for consulting and design build work. VTA will continue to monitor prompt payment. Very important. That doesn't stop. Again, prompt payment of all your subs, etc. Termination substitution provisions still apply for contracts that were awarded prior to October 3rd. And DBEs may not be terminated or have its work reduced without VTA's written consent. Next slide. VTA will still implement the small business participation elements. I've shared with you what they are. Pre-bids and prime contractor networking will continue. No DBE goals assignments on new contracts until the California Unified Certification Directory has a sufficient number of certified DBE neutral firms. I want to share with you once again the message on this directory is all businesses who meet the criteria of being small and submission of a personal narrative and the submission of a personal net worth along with other requirements of the application can be placed on the California UCP directory as a DBE. So It's not race and gender specific any longer. And as the last point of our message, pausing the DBE participation counting on contracts awarded before October 3rd. Contracts awarded after October 3rd, there will not be a requirement in collecting the DBE participation as well. So I believe we're at the questions slide, but before we go into open questions, Remy, is there anything you would like to add to what I presented before we open the floor to questions?
Not really. I think you hit the nail. You hit it on the head. And one of the reasons why we put this together is we always say to our prime and subcontractors that your success rubs off on us. So we want you to be aware of these changes. We want you to be in compliance. We also want to be in compliance as an awarding body, and we want to work together as a team so that we are both in compliance. Because as you know, our funding comes from the federal. A lot of our funding comes from the USDOT, and it is very, very important that we, as an awarding body, we do comply. We've had news on what's going on. We want to stay focused. We want to stay in compliance so that we can partner as a team for the success of our projects moving forward with this new requirement. So, Miss Olivia, that's all I have. And
okay, and you remind me, Remy, that today's presentation applies only to contracts with federal funding.
that is correct.
And you know, you do have state funded and local funded projects only,
Yes.
right? And if you can explain to them,
As
Go
an awarding body, we have multi funds. We have funds from federal, states, and local. So what we are talking about today, the changes to the DBE only affect federally funded contracts. And as you know, when we talk about federally funded contracts, we may have a contract that has a federal, state, and local. However, once he has those three funds, we have to, it's federalized contract. So it applies to federally funded contracts. At the same time, we have contracts that are states or locally funded contracts. This requirement does not apply to them. 3 weeks ago, when the new regulation came out, we sent out a memo via B2G to all our contractors, subcontractors with active, non-active contracts, just to clarify that this is only applicable to federally funded projects. If you are a contractor that is working on a state or locally funded that we deemed an SBE, this does not apply to you.
thank you, Remy. We have a hand up.
Well, let me start with
Yeah.
the questions in the queue that came in first.
Okay,
The first question is, will you be sharing these slides? Yes, we will. We'll be uploading them to our Office of Small Business Development Programs website. So please be on the lookout. Within the next week, you should see the slides and the recording there. Next question, for contracts executed prior to October 3rd, which have DBE requirements, since the pool of DBE firms will be changed, will there be a reassessment of DBE participation percentage requirements on a project-by-project basis?
for contracts prior to October 3rd, there will not be a reassessment of the goal on those contracts. That goal that was assigned when it was awarded remains through the life of that contract.
Can you give an example of what the requirements consist of in a personal narrative?
So a personal narrative is the opportunity for the applicant to describe what challenges they have faced uh, in being in business. So I'll use myself as an example, Hispanic female, okay? I cannot use that as a reason to describe why I am socially disadvantaged, because that would go back to the presumption, the mere presumption that I am Hispanic and a female is no longer viable in applying for a DBE determination. So what do I say in my application? I say something to the effect that I have applied for loans to grow my business and I have been denied because either I am too small or the fact that I don't have enough history in business to be granted the loan. So that is a social disadvantage because I'm small. As as a professional services firm, I have been challenged in identifying myself as a prime because I don't have the bandwidth to prepare these glossy handouts, poster boards, PowerPoints and so on in competition with other firms who are larger than me and pursuing the same proposal. So that's kind of an example. You can take that idea and move it over to construction, for instance, where let's say I'm in concrete. I submit bids to prime contractors and I'm rejected because my bids are not complete. I am challenged because there are not enough there are not enough supportive services specific to my business in concrete to bid properly. Those are just, again, some of the ideas that I'm sharing with you and can present it as a personal narrative as to why that firm is socially disadvantaged.
Just a follow-up question to that. Chris Lepe with Mariposa Planning Solutions. Good to be here. Thank you for having this. Those examples seem to me to be more so oriented around just being a small business.
Yes.
So how does that relate to social disadvantage and why? Yeah, I'm just kind of a little bit confused. In terms of making the case. I think I could pretty easily make that case as well, but I don't necessarily know if that hits the social disadvantage criteria. And also that just, by the way, just brings up a secondary question, which is the subjectivity of all this, and whether or not, like, this is, Olivia, if you have any you've heard any concerns around that from others.
Yeah. So first part is your confusion about how does my examples identify as social, because we're accustomed to social being either culturally based, race-based, or gender-based. And the new rule clearly says cannot use race and gender as the basis to describe our social disadvantage. So the next best is being small, okay? As being a challenge and reason why we haven't grown as a company. And so I gave examples. It doesn't always have to be because you're a small business, but it's going to definitely be a reason described by many companies as to why they're still socially disadvantaged, being small, being not able to grow their company and denied opportunities, credit, bonds, loans, and so forth. The other part to your question is the subjectivity. Yes, that is a concern expressed across the country from even certification staff. How do they ensure that the description of the personal narrative is credible. Well, the instructions are going to include to provide evidence. So copies of loans that have been denied, copies of bids that have been rejected, those are going to be the evidence in support of the narrative, for instance. Okay, hopefully I answered your question. We have other questions?
Lee, I'm unmuting you. Go ahead.
Olivia, Lee Cunningham, again, you did a beautiful job as usual. 2 questions. Number 1, if I live in a hub zone, do I qualify since I'm obviously economically disadvantaged? Number 1. Number 2, as a supplier, it's my understanding as of right now, not for the contracts before, but given the terms that everybody in California, well, just across the nation, the major contractors only look at suppliers who meet the DBE qualifications. And given your comments about CUF, I am assuming that the requirements for a DBE supplier are set aside because they won't be looking for CUF the way they would have before. So those 2 questions. Do I qualify being in a hub zone?
So there's no provisions in the eligibility to say you instantly qualified because you are in a hub zone. You would still need to make the case that you are economically disadvantaged. You personally are economically disadvantaged, which includes the submission of your personal net worth, indicating you don't have a net worth above $2 million, and that your income taxes would indicate that as a supplier, you are not exceeding the threshold for the small business size threshold as a supplier. The commercially useful function requirement is going to remain the same as we have experienced in the past. You'll be reviewed for performing a commercially useful function as a supplier, meaning that you own, control, and manage the supply items. You either get 40% credit as a distributor if you have no access to the material, all the material that's needed on the job, or you get 60% credit if you have, the supply items in your warehouse and are able to transport it to the particular job sites. So that doesn't change. Commercial useful function is still going to continue or will continue, as described in the DBE regulations.
Rachel, did you have a question? All right, Remy, if you don't mind.
I'm a currently certified 8A firm, having already submitted a personal statement that addressed how I was illegally federally discriminated against in a way that impacted me financially, and annually have to resubmit personal net worth statements to the federal government in SAM. Is there any provision that people who are currently certified 8As are automatically unilaterally recertified, or anything that would, make sense to make this more efficient across the board, or they just want us to jump through all the same hoops all over again?
So let me answer it by saying they want you to jump through the hoops all over again. I know it doesn't sound as nice coming from me to say that, but that is pretty much the requirement in the rule. Is you still have to submit an application that indicates you are in fact socially and economically disadvantaged. The fact that you have experience in preparing personal narratives is great because you could probably pull that out, include it with your application. In fact, SBA, their website on preparing personal narratives is probably the most active web page of recent with firms, DBE, small businesses that are looking at that website to see what do I need to do to prepare a narrative. So you're ahead of the game in terms of having the narrative, justifying your economic disadvantage status. Now we need to get you to fill out the California UCP application.
Miss Olivia, can I just quickly add 1 or 2 things? VTA as an executive member of the California CUCP, one of the things that we are doing is we are looking at the already certified DBE firms. So most of the other agencies that do certification, BART, LA Metro, Caltrans, they are no longer taking on new applications. So what they are looking at is the existing current DBE firms that we have to do a reevaluation on. So once the personal narratives we finish with how we can do the personal narratives processes and procedures, and also the net worth, we are going to go first with all the certified DBEs on the database. So each certifying agency will take a look at all the DBE firms that they've certified. Those will be the first order of priority. Then anyone's, if assuming LA Metro has the most, if they need help, then we will jump in. So just to, Rachel, to add to your question, existing and current DBE firms are going to be looked at first before we take on board any new application.
Let me jump to the next online question in queue, and that is, DBEs are by default also SBEs. Can't UCPs just recertify DBEs as SBEs and proceed with SBEs?
We wish we could. However, we as VTA is required to follow the rules, and it's very specific. The applicant needs to validate that they are socially and economically disadvantaged. And as Remy indicated, the priority are for the firms that have already gone through the certification process. We're on the directory. Now those firms need to supplement the file with a personal narrative and a new personal network.
All right, Carrie, would you like to unmute yourself?
Thank you so much, Olivia. Again, the information has been very helpful. On slides 6 and 8 of the presentation, one of the line items that caught my attention was that should a DBE not be able to recertify, that the only options were to terminate or substitute that participant on your roster. Is not another option that we would leave them, we just wouldn't use them towards our DBE credits? If we have a relationship with a sub that is performing well and we love their work, I don't want to have to be forced to remove them. And it seems like that's what's being said here. Could you clarify?
Okay.
Correct my understanding?
I definitely, I'm looking at slide 5, and I can understand your concern with how it's written here. But basically, it's saying that if the DBE is not recertified, VTA will need to take appropriate action to discontinue the effect of that DBE's participation in the contract. And parentheses, termination / substitution. What I'm trying to say in that bullet is if the DBE does not get recertified, they no longer have the protection of not being terminated or substituted without VTA's approval. VTA would need to be involved if the DBE is recertified and the prime contractor wants to terminate and or substitute them. But if they're not recertified, the DBE cannot use the protection of requiring VTA to approve the termination and or substitution. Is that making more sense for you, Carrie?
Thank you so much. That makes a lot more sense. I wanted to make sure that we weren't at risk of losing really good people because of policy. If we don't get the credit for them, that's just the way it is. But we would lose so much more in dollars if we had to find someone else and start up again.
Oh, yeah, we don't want you to do that. No,
Yeah,
that's not the intent. Yes,
yeah, thank you.
We want, that's part of our saying, encourage the DBEs to be reevaluated, recertified. It speaks well of the prime contractor, good stewards to VTA that you encourage, and obviously, Carrie, from your own speaking up, we want DBEs to be treated equally. You want them on your project, we want them on your project, and of course, the DBE wants to stay on the project.
Okay, circling back here to in the room, if you don't mind picking up the mic and pushing the people button. And when you're finished, push it again, please.
Sorry,
Olivia, did you get that?
we couldn't hear
Yeah, I was just gonna say we
what she
couldn't
was
hear.
saying.
Oh, okay. Was your green light on when you were speaking?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's try it another mic.
It's not. Try this.
It's green.
Maybe just closer to your mouth as well.
Okay, so do I repeat?
Yes, can hear you.
Okay, so this is following up on the last question, which I think clarified to some degree a similar issue or similar question I have. So again, Agata Sulczynska Weiss Associates, we're an environmental firm, currently have an as-needed contract with VTA for environmental services. We do have an authorized task order that was authorized before October 3rd. We have one DBE firm on that contract, which satisfies our goal. It's an Alaskan Native firm, which I would imagine would not get recertified because of the net worth requirements. So what is our obligation if they were not to get recertified, but we do have a DBE goal in that contract moving forward? Do we need to replace them? They're a stellar firm. There are not many firms that do the same service that are probably going to get certified as DBE. We don't have enough scope to give away sufficient amounts of work to meet the DBE goal otherwise. How do we handle that?
Okay, so this is going to be not an answer that I can give you today because we have to look, VTA would need to look at the circumstances behind, is a firm going to apply? If they're not, why? Is it because they graduated? Which if they're considered a graduate based on existing DBE rule, they would continue on the work. And it doesn't penalize you as a contractor for the DBE's graduation, nor does it penalize VTA. So once again, we have to wait for the actual situation to be at hand for REMI's office to look at what remedy does REMI have to rectify the situation. And of course, we want to have the DBE continue on the project and finish.
Thank you.
All right, our next online question. Can VTA specify inclusion in the program at bid time? Whereas a medium-sized business gathers together dozens of SBE firms to perform most of the work on its proposed contract so that many firms can be included and so that the medium-sized firms will not be excluded.
Remy, tag team.
We do have an SBE program where we always tell our prime contractors that as an awarding body, we would like you to include as many SBE firms as possible. And the intent of that is we have an aspirational 19% SBE goal. So for SBE related contracts, you are free to include as many firms, SBE contractors that can do. If you have there's a scope of work in that contract that they can do. We do not limit you to the number of firms you include in an SBE contract. Does that answer your question?
That was an anonymous participant. So if you have a follow-up, please do type it in for us to read, or feel free to unmute yourself if you'd like. All right, we've got someone raising their hand. Go ahead, Kathy.
I think you have to unmute, Kathy.
Yeah, hi. So earlier you had said that it requires the reevaluation of the DBE by the CUCP. And it's inferred also that VTA would or could do recertification. So do we have to go to the state? Or can we go to VTA? VTA handles it for us. And how do we get the application?
Okay.
And what's included in that application?
Okay. Just to quickly say, we've been meeting with the CUCP, all the certifying agency and Caltrans. We've all been meeting with CUCP. We also have another meeting tomorrow. One of the things which we said we're going to do, if you are certified by VTA, any DBE firm that was certified by VTA will need to come to VTA. If VTA is your certifying agency, once we determined how we're going to do the personal narratives, the statement, we come up with the criteria. If we are your certifying agency, you have to reach out to us. Once we come up with how we're going to do it, we are going to send an email out to all the firms that we have certified. So if Caltrans is your certifying agency, you have to reach out to Caltrans. If BAT is your certifying agency, you have to reach out to your certifying agency. So after we've completed the reevaluation of the firms that we certified, then other ones that are left, we are going to come together with the CUCP again. Then we're going to start assisting the rest of the firms, because some of the agencies, they do have more firms that is certified. I'll give you an example, like LA Metro. LA Metro has over 2,000 DBE firms on their belt. We have about just a little bit over 200. So there's a tendency that we may finish our certification first before LA Metro. Then we have to reconvene again to see the status of all the 6,000 DBE firms, certified DBE firms in California. Then we start talking to each other to see how we can all assist one another, so that we do the 6,000 before we start taking new applications.
And just to piggyback on that, California will not move forward until all existing firms have been evaluated. So, one agency cannot open up and start accepting DBEs and instituting goals on their contracts before another agency in California. All of California has to be in unison and move together forward as one. So, Kathy, did you have some more to your question?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like we should all be in line. We should all have our application in, and that this should be moving forward. And, so far since we found out about it, it's a lot of people talking about it, and there isn't a path to get it accomplished.
Well, that's exactly where we are right now, Kathy, because this was sprung upon us, maybe 1 or 2 days before it went into effect. There are a lot of moving parts internally for the entire CUCP. And if you can imagine, you as an applicant have so many things that you have to address to become certified. On our end, as certifying bodies, as recipients of federal funds, there's a lot that goes into just evaluating one certification. When you're talking 6,000 across the entire state, that's a massive movement. And we aren't even 30 days into this, and we're trying to figure out, what does this mean? How do we go about doing this? How do we move forward? So, bear with us, because this is not an easy task that we're moving into.
I mean, you mentioned get your application. Is there an application?
Right now, there's no application because we have to come up with how we're going to do the reevaluation. We have to come up with procedures as well. So once we come up with that, we have to put that to the, I think it's the USDOT for approval before we move forward. So we can't just take it upon ourselves to say, oh, we've put a procedure together, we're going to start certifying. We have to make sure that the folks who wants to do a reevaluation, they approve the process and the procedures that we are moving forward with.
Is the federal SBA can they handle it?
No,
Or
no.
you guys? No.
No, that's a different organization.
Okay.
And as someone pointed out, they're not working right now. So
Yeah. One of our challenges is there's a lot of moving parts. Even when we try to reach them, there's nobody there to answer the question. So it's another thing that we are grappling with. Yeah.
Any sense of what the timeline is for getting this back up?
To be honest with you,
we haven't even put our arms fully around it.
No.
It could be 6 months.
Could be.
Hopefully it doesn't go beyond that.
Yeah.
But nobody has answered that question yet.
Yeah.
Oh, heck no.
Okay.
Rachel? Sure. Give her the mic if you don't.
A message of hope. There is a federal personal net worth statement that I have to submit every year with my 8A that might be helpful. It's presumably, if they accept it for that program, they ought to accept it for this one, but God knows they're not coordinated or anything. So I'll certainly share that with you, Remy. So if one department of the federal government accepts it for efficiency's sake, they ought to all, but they probably won't. But I'll send it to you. For what it's worth, people can get their ducks in a row.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank
Jennifer.
you.
Thank you. Okay, Jennifer.
Yeah, we still have some more questions. Please clarify what is meant by small business. Are these SBEs certified by VTA? SBs certified by DGS? Sure. So, Abigail, yes, small businesses, VTA does certify our own small business enterprises. VTA does accept, of course, our own certifications, and we also accept the SB micro certifications in the DGS. I hope that answers your question. Please let me know if you have a follow-up to that. Let's see, we accept DGS micro, SB micro. No, the thresholds are different for those. John has a question for contracts executed prior to October 3rd, which have DBE requirements. All right, Olivia, is it plausible that a substantial amount of DBE designated work on an active contract is performed during the DBE reporting hiatus? I'll break that up. So that's the first question, Olivia.
Can you repeat it for me, please?
Okay, for contracts executed prior to October 3rd, which have DBE requirements, it is plausible that a substantial amount of DBE designated work on an active contract is performed during the DBE reporting hiatus.
Mhm.
When the reporting is reactivated, the remaining work for DBEs may not be sufficient to meet the contract requirements. Will there be any retroactive considerations in these cases for DBE work performed over the life of the contract?
Okay, so I wish I had a solid answer for you on this, and I don't. But the good news is that you have DBEs on a contract prior to October 3rd, and you're going to continue the prompt payment information, which will be tracked by Remy's office through B2G Now. So the office will be able to determine from the B2G Now reports the DBE participation level on that contract. Now, the part that I cannot answer is what is, how is FTA or FHWA going to guide us on counting the DBE participation on a contract that was that had a goal based on older criteria. So that is where I don't know exactly what FHWA FTA is going to tell us on that. I can presume the answer is going to be the goal that was originally assigned will be the goal throughout the life of the project, and monitoring will be based on attainment of the goal at the end of the project. So if you don't meet the goal at the end of the project, how can we penalize you when the goal was based on criteria that is no longer acceptable? So that is the part that I don't know what FTA and or FHWA would tell us to how to handle, because that's not anywhere in the guidance that they've just issued on Friday, but it is a question that needs to be answered, because I don't see a reason why we reasonably could penalize you for not meeting your DBE commitment.
Sorry if I missed this, but will there be any, are there, moving forward, any federal DBE like percentage requirements? Like, is that, I mean, I'm assuming that's on hold, but will there be in the future? Do we know?
We have no clue. It's everything's on hold. So obviously these things, all of these things we're trying to figure out and trying to discern how to implement and count and prepare for. And,
Yeah.
we're
So let me kind of answer it as well by adding to what Jennifer just said. At the immediate, we don't have an answer, but what we do see in a forecast, okay, let's say it's a year from today. The UCP, the California UCP, has completed their reevaluation of the firms on the directory. The California UCP has opened the system to accept new applications. So now the California UCP can announce that there are sufficient number of DBE neutral firms in the directory. This opens the opportunity for BTA to complete a I wouldn't even say to complete a goal and methodology based on the new information in the directory. During the methodology process, VTA could also request a formal disparity study that would identify any potential disparity of any firm or any group by race and or gender that needs to have some special attention. But only through a disparity study can that be completed or accepted, by FTA. So is there going to be an overall DBE goal in the future? Yes. Once the directory has established sufficient number of DBE neutral firms, will there be a potential for DBE goal assignments on contracts? Yes, but only after substantial data that justifies a DBE neutral conscious goal. Okay, so a disparity study would be a sufficient tool that would assist VTA in going back to assigning individual contract goals.
Just for clarification purposes, the reason why I asked that is because I am currently a DBE, but I'm considering just not going through the DBE process and I actually, matter of fact, just submitted for SBE through VTA. But if in the future federal contracts, state contracts, and so on and so forth do have a DBE requirement, then that would conceivably put, a firm like mine at a disadvantage, right? Like it would. So that's kind of what the process I'm thinking through is like, okay, I didn't want to have to go through the whole process, this whole personal narrative. I'm skeptical, but maybe I just have to do it. I don't know, but that's kind of where I'm at.
Well, and then let me explain why I encourage you to be reevaluated and recertified. VTA is going to really need to, I would say, step up the game on assigning smaller contracts just for DBE neutral firms, setting aside just for DBE neutral firms, and also being able to set aside just for small business enterprises under the current DBE program plan. So there is some hope there that assigning set-asides is the requirement, okay? Now, without the disparity study to set conscious goals, then you're right in that contractors are going to be our good stewards, our partners, and using and identifying DBEs from the directory on their work. Okay. Aspirational goals can be assigned on contracts, but aspirationals are not requirements.
All right. Next question. I'll just answer yes, participants can receive a recording of this presentation. As mentioned earlier, we will upload this to our webpage along with the presentation within the next week. Quick question. When will the new DBE program take effect? That took effect October 3rd. Remy, my company is a DBE and has existing contracts, and we are doing billable work on these contracts. Will we be paid for the work done to date if our firm is not recertified as a DBE?
Definitely, you're gonna be paid for all the work you've done, even if you assuming in the future you didn't make the recertification. One of the things that we as an awarding body, which we do, is provided you've done some work, you have to be paid, irrespective of if you couldn't get it, we have to pay you because you've done the work.
Was there another question in the room here? Yes, sir. Okay, Remy, I'll bring you the mic.
Gary, Fairway Electric. We've had some primes reach out to us for some VTA projects. I didn't qualify under the old rules for DBE, but I think now we will qualify for the new rules. But what do we do since we were never, at this juncture, it sounds like we just wait. Is that kind of how I understand it?
So everybody who is current has been certified as a DBE. Their reapplication will first be considered before new considerations are made. And that is for the entire state. So the entire state has to get through 6,000 applications should they recertify. This will be a proactive step, obviously, for folks to take that are priorly certified DBE firms. But then after that, the whole state, then can move into new certifications.
So nothing as of right now, basically. Just
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Understood. Thank you.
Natalie, would you like to unmute yourself?
Yes, thank you. I'm not in complete understanding of what the VTA can do, but would it be possible to pivot to a small or micro business requirement while the DBE program is paused?
Yes. I've been talking to some of the project managers and program managers, especially on the BSV phase 2, so that we can start utilizing some of the SBE requirements for our programs. Yes, we are looking into that. And there's a couple of contracts that we are looking at to utilize the small business elements.
That's great news. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. Next question, please provide more information on what is a personal narrative as an example. I know we did that. Olivia, did you have any other thoughts before we move to the next one?
Well, what industry is this individual in?
If that was your question, would you mind unmuting and answering? We'll move forward and let them work on raising their hand. The next question, will VTA be providing a template for the firms to write to the required statements of social and economic advantage? It would make it easier for the firms to draft info and for VTA to review the info. I can say that's not going to happen.
No.
You have to
Right.
with
Yeah,
your own
we
personal and social economic
yeah.
narrative. We can't lead or guide the witness.
Yeah. But you know, Remy, if we can add the website to the SBA sample on preparing personal narratives along with a secondary .com that assists firms in preparing personal narratives. If we can include that in next week's.
This is Anne, Remy, and Jennifer. In addition to what Olivia was saying and what Remy has been mentioning earlier, we as a CUCP member, we're going to be discussing this one tomorrow, including any PNW and personal narrative assistance to all certified firms. So at the moment, it will be up to the CUCP to give guidance on this one. So we cannot just use the SBA one without approval from the CUCP. So we don't want to preempt the CUCP at this time. So just wait for our notifications coming from the CUCP, and we'll update everyone all at the same time within the state of California. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Next question, if our DBE expires before a contract that was signed before October 3rd expires, do we have to renew to keep working on that contract?
In answer to that question, prior to the October 3 regulation, any DBE certification does not automatically expire. The only reason that would happen is if the certifying agency has to certify the firm for any reasons that could be non-responsiveness or exceeding the small business size standard. But otherwise, it should not expire. So everyone that are currently certified in the DBE database, if they want to get reevaluated once everybody has been notified of the requirements, they should respond. And if they do not respond, then that would be an indication that they're not amenable to the review, and that would qualify as a decertification of their certification.
Thank you, Anne. How does getting a DBE neutral certification help with getting awarded a contract? Will there be goals for contractors with DBE neutral certification? Yes, it'll be very similar, Carol, to the current DBE program. you know, it's the same now as if you're a DBE certified firm, it does help with getting awarded a contract. I don't know, Anna or Olivia, if you have anything to add.
It just repeating what I shared earlier about maintaining or pursuing your DBE neutral goal, contract. It will give you that opportunity for those contracts that will be solicited as a set aside for DBE neutral firms, and of course the aspirational goals that will and could be included in future larger contracts.
What is the cost of getting recertified, and what is the estimated timeline for getting recertified?
I would, unless Anne wants to speak up, I would say that there's no cost to the agency who you're submitting your reevaluation to. Now, timeframes, I think that would be up to the agency that you're submitting your reevaluation application to in terms of the workload. As Remy has mentioned, LA Metro has a huge caseload, and VTA may be assisting them just to make sure that these applications are not in a holding pattern, because everybody needs to, all these certifying agencies need to work together and collaborate on completing the task of reevaluating the firms on the existing directory.
Anne, did you have something to add?
No, Olivia answered it.
Okay.
So we don't have an exact timeline on when the DBE database will be open again. So not until all the certifying agencies are evaluations are done.
Okay, and then to answer a question, when do the current DBE firms need to submit documents? When do the current DBE firms need to submit documents to be reevaluated? As Anne mentioned earlier, stand by. We will be letting folks know once that goes live for everyone. Did we have a question in the room? All right. You mentioned that for contracts executed prior to October 3rd, we'll still have the same DBE participation goal. However, the monitoring of DBE participation on B2G is paused. So how will VTA track DBE participation goals? Also, if there are current DBEs that are not recertified, will contracts be given time to meet the new requirement?
Okay, multiple questions there. So VTA will be monitoring prompt payment, and if you're awarded a contract prior to October 3rd, it's already set up in B2G for your contract as to who the DBEs are. So no change there in terms of the prime contractor completing the B2G each time a payment's made to all subcontractors. And that is the tool that VTA will use to track DBEs and all subcontractors that have been paid. Go ahead, Remy.
I also want to say we are no longer tracking DBE participation goals anymore. We reach out to B2G and they are aware. As Miss Olivia said, prompt payment, we are still tracking and making sure that when you get paid, you paid your subs on time.
Yeah.
As a prime with a DBE goal being met by subs, if we continue to do business in this interim recertification, will those dollars count if the firm is recertified? If not, how will VTA expect us to hit our project goals as time is passing and projects are moving forward?
There is no more goals, so it's we are not tracking your goals.
Yeah, there's no goal, there's no tracking. Carrie, I think you can hear us. That must have been some time ago. Can everyone hear the questions and the answers? If I can get a thumbs up or a head nod or something.
Yes.
Perfect. Next question. VTA is our jurisdiction of original certification, or JOC. When will VTA start the recertification process? I think we kind of touched that. We're just sort of waiting for the go as a CUCP as a whole, and we'll all move forward together in lockstep with this recertification process. Is there a deadline for recertification? Also, does this have anything to do with payment terms for DBE? No. No and no. Let's see. Will we receive the request from Jennifer Mena? Oh, good question. It will probably come from me via B2G now. So if you do not hear anything within the next couple of weeks, feel free to reach out to me. Kathy, I see your hand is raised, so please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, so follow up on the last question where she mentioned the original certifying agency. A number of the agencies had elected to not certify anymore. So for example, we were with Golden Gate at one point. They passed us off to Peninsula Corridor, and Peninsula Corridor no longer does it, but they accept what Caltrans does. So can we start over with Caltrans, or are you supposed to try and go back to your original certifier?
You should go to your agency that you are certified with currently. As I understand, Golden Gate does not certify. So maybe that's why you were bumped along.
Well, we originally were certified by them.
Okay. Okay. Well, whoever you're certified with by right now, that would be who you would go back to. And you'll hear the agencies will reach out to the different applicants or firms, if you will. All right. Got a lot of questions. That's good. Thank you for a very informative meeting. Apologies. Oh, thank you for leaving and letting us know, Peggy. Let's see. Can VTA pivot to a small or micro business requirement? Yes. I have received my certification in August. Do I need to recertify my firm? Yes, sadly. So sorry about that. When can new applicants or those who have applicants that were never approved apply? So again, that will happen after all current and existing DBE certified firms have been readdressed. So it may take a moment. Bear with us. Can VTA provide a checklist on items to address in a narrative? Again, that is something that is forthcoming via the CUCP meeting tomorrow. Hopefully we'll have more information for folks, before we push out the email to you all. Let's see. I thought Olivia mentioned that the DBE participation goal remains for contracts prior to October 3rd, but Remy stated that there is no longer DBE participation goal and that VTA will not be tracking DBE participation goal. Did I misunderstand? Yes, please.
Basically, if you have a contract that was awarded prior to October 3rd, and it says it's assuming it's a 7% DBE goal, we are no longer going to be tracking the participation goal just to see if you meet the 7% DBE goal. We are no longer going to be enforcing the requirements of a DBE tracking. Ms. Olivia, do you want to add to that?
No, Remy, you said it very well. You are the agency that has to implement it, so. If I misspoke, my apologies, Remy.
I'd like to add to that, please. And this is Anne. Remy, yeah, you're right. We're not counting participation, but that's going to be temporary until everything else is reevaluated. We will know after when everything is reviewed, when all agencies in California has finish evaluating all certified firms, then we will know if we need to reevaluate all existing contracts that had prior goals. And at the time we'll know if we will still continue with the goal or we'll just not put any goals in it. But for the meantime, everything is suspended.
When will VTA follow LA Metro and add a DVBE goal? Remy?
We we used to have a MWB at some point. I think yeah, part of the reason why we kind of did away with it is we have a lot of back then there was only a few of us, which is about 2 or 3, and we have a lot of contracts. And in order to make sure that the staff, we do get staff time to focus on some of these contracts, it was impossible for us to start doing all these programs. That's part of the reasons why we did do away with some programs like MWBE and
Yeah,
DBE.
yeah, we did. We had the MWBE and the DVBE and the SBE and the DBE, and there were 3 of us. Two were certifiers.
Yeah.
Not only that, we had to monitor all the contracts, set the goals. It's a lot. So to make sure that we're properly administrating a program, you know, you can't have 15 programs and 3 people. So, but great question. For interstate firms, has DOT provided any guidance on working with other state UCPs? Yeah, basically what the guidance is whatever firm is certified in a particular state, that is your home state, or your JOC, that firm will continue with this process forward in that state. And then files will be shared as we move forward. And did you have any additions to that?
And now you answered it succinctly. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you. Why not give DVBEs parity with DBE? They're not the same.
No, they're not the same.
They're not the same,
One is a
Peter.
disadvantage and the other one is what to call this one? I'm sorry.
The veteran firm.
Yes,
And
veteran, sorry.
I personally laud and thank all DVBEs, all veterans. Thank you for your service. It means a whole lot to me personally. But it is a different category, if you will. What are the thresholds for demonstrating a disadvantage in the personal narrative? The example provided, which relied on being a small and a disadvantage, could be perceived for firms from 1 person to 1,000 people. There are always bigger fish with, and that was cut off. If you have more information, please go ahead and type that in. Carol's asking, is the state or federal government providing funds to support certifying agencies for the extra work requested? Wouldn't that be nice? That would be very nice, Carol. Thank you. Lobby your congressperson. If DBE participation goals are no longer being tracked, are prime firms no longer required to comply with the precedent DBE participation goals? Sure, or Ann, look like Ann.
Regardless of certified firm or not, any prime contractor are not allowed to remove a contractor without written consent from the agency. I hope that
Right. Do we have any other? I'm sorry, Ann?
I'm sorry?
Didn't mean to cut you off. Were you done?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Awesome. Anyone else in the room with any other questions? No? Online, do we have any other questions? If so, quickly unmute yourself. This has been a robust discussion. Beautiful. We do one more in the room. Okay.
Oh, cash flow issue. Cash flow, yeah. So I have a question concerning the upcoming RFP issuance. I heard that the new contract won't include any DBE participation goals. So could you please share VTA's policy on the setting of DBE goals? I know that you still have the aspiration, but I am afraid because the delaying in time that if we don't have any setting for the upcoming, you said about 6 months, even 6 months is very critical for the cash flow for the small companies.
Yeah, yeah. The nice thing is that we still are setting SBE goals, small business enterprise goals on our contracts. So, and still doing outreach. And Remy, did you have something more?
For an awarding body like us, we do encourage our prime contractor, even though for now, we don't know at some point when all the recertification are done and things gets back to normal, we're probably going to be setting a DBE goal. However, for now, as an awarding body, we always encourage our prime contractors to reach out to small businesses like yours in order to assist them in the contracting opportunities. One of the things we also have is we have an SBE 19% aspirational goal. We have contracts out there that where we do calculate SBE. We mandate based on the calculation that was done. We mandate the prime. Hey, we have a 7, we have a 15% or whatever is goal for this SBE contract, and they are required to reach out to folks like you, if you are an SBE firm, in order to assist them to meet the goal. For the contracts you are talking about, that's probably a BSV phase 2. Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff going on. They are looking into, obviously, there's a reason why they are reevaluating the contract, and when it comes out, obviously there's going to be an SBE portion attached to the contract, even though for now we are not doing any DBE participation goals. Yeah.
Ma'am, did you have a question? No? Okay. All right. Thank you. Remy?
Thank you, everyone. This is great, and thank you for being part of this discussion. And Miss Olivia, we want to say thank you to you for the knowledge and the some of the responses you provide. And hopefully, we are all in this together. Hopefully, we are hoping 6 months. We don't know, but hopefully, everything will normalize back, and we can start doing what we love doing, working together as one team. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Remy.